Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nerds Only podcast. You are here with your hairiest host, Mother Goose.
And your most inconsistent host, Cosmar.
And we're actually joined today with my good friend, Setherton.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing all right. Long time no see.
This is your first time on Nerds Only, but if any listeners, if you've been on Animal Squadron, he has appeared on a couple episodes there, but he is also the voice of our intro, so you definitely would have heard him on all the episodes.
On this podcast?
Animal Squadron, the Star Wars one.
Okay, I was like, you used me on both?
Surprise, extra podcast. Well, today we are finally doing our Wind and Truth Spoilercast. So if you have not finished Wind and Truth, you'll definitely want to get out of here because everything's on the table. And I think probably as connected as it is to the rest of the Cosmere, I think probably most of the Cosmere is on the table today as well in terms of spoilers. Okay, so I think we just get straight into the juicy stuff.
Yeah.
What's your ranking or rating of this novel? I think I'm going to give it a 4.5.
Out of
really
5?
Good, really loved it, but not perfect.
Out of 5, Josiah asked?
Oh, yes.
Got it. I'd say like a 4.8. I think for where it stands in the series itself, and though the prose was a little difficult, it was pretty enjoyable. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. This is where it becomes clear that you guys brought me on here to make fun of me and bully me because I'm going to probably have to say for me 3.5 out of 5.
Different,
yeah.
laugh at
you.
Yeah. Here's the thing. If I'm ranking it as a Cosmere book, then 4.5 out of 5. As a Stormlight book, I think I'm going to have to put it at 3.5.
That's fair.
Okay. Which, Joey and I, we've talked a lot about the other Stormlight novels, but for you, is that your lowest rated Stormlight?
That probably, unfortunately, would have to be my lowest rated Stormlight.
That's fair.
Book. And I have some reasons I can defend my position. We don't have to get into it right now.
No, I'm glad. Yeah. I'm glad you're here. I think having a little contrast will be good.
Yeah.
Better than having an hour of me and Joey just saying, "Yeah, this is amazing.
This book's the
best." To clarify, 3.5 out of 5 is still a 7 out of 10, which is
for sure.
It's high praise coming from me because I tend to be pretty opinionated about media.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think really the big thing for this novel that I think hurt it for some fans, other fans really loved it, is the other 4 Stormlight novels were a 5-act or 5-part structure, while Book 5 is a 10-day structure, and that really changed the flow of things. How did you guys feel about that?
At first, it was super cool, because like you said, the previous books all had parts 1 through 5 as kind of the, once you finish a part, you finish that part of the story, and going forward, the status quo has changed, and in the next part, we're going to be dealing with stuff that was introduced at the end of the previous part. This one, it was really cool to see day 1 at the top right after the prologue, and then to see end of day 1 interludes, and then day 2 and stuff like that. I realized at the end of Rhythm of War, they set the Contest of Champions 10 days from when Rhythm of War ended, and then the epigraphs at the end of Rhythm of War were the musings of El on the last of the final 10 days.
Right.
And so seeing that and realizing oh, we're actually doing this. The break lines have been cut. We are barreling down towards this ending that has been waiting in store for us for the past decade. like was super cool. I think that there were times when the fact that this book was really paced like a thriller, made it was a lot to see. I'm on day 3 out of 10, and I'm already like, in a good way, I'm already exhausted from just the mad dash pace that this book had. But I think, you know, it's a good time to change the status quo, because that's kind of what this book was all about.
Yeah. Joey?
The pacing was definitely a little strange, changing up the structure of the story a little bit. But it didn't really bother me much. Like, it was just, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of the structure of the story, and I just accepted it as it is. I didn't really have any huge opinions on that pacing at all, other than just, it was a little out of the ordinary, but it was still enjoyable. I still liked it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I was really excited when I saw it as well, especially with how well it was, like, I know it's structure, but just like foreshadowed within Rhythm of War.
Right.
I thought it was a really cool way to change it.
Yeah.
I do think it did kind of lock the prose down. You know, with the other structure, you know, you could have a Kaladin chapter, and then, you know, maybe it's a couple days later with the Shallan chapter, and there was room for Brandon to jump the story around where it needed to be. So I do feel like the 10-day structure locked it down pretty heavily, but I don't necessarily think that was a bad thing.
Yeah, it was a really big shift from what we've seen. Because, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but in Way of Kings, Kaladin, I think, only really spent a month or two in the bridge cruise before being freed by Dalinar, or something like that. Like two or 3 months. Like, it was a short amount of time, and you know it is because of the situation that they were in and the fact that many of them had survived by the end of it. Whereas Shallan and Yasna's parts of that story seem to cover a wider range of time. Like, I got the sense that Shallan got brought on as Yasna's ward, like, long before Kaladin was sold into the bridge cruise. And I see what you're saying about how in this book you can't really play that sort of game with it, where you're doing this, the stories all have their climax at this same time, but we can play with the pacing of them. When you structure it by days like that, it does kind of lock you down into what has to happen in this particular part.
So yeah, I again, not bad, just different. Moving us to the prologue, we finally get Gavilar dying again.
Whoa!
Woohoo!
But from his perspective, how did we feel about this?
I read the prologue when it first was released on Brandon's YouTube channel. Like, right after the secret projects had been, I don't know if they were announced or if they had done a thing where, like, they did a video acknowledging that it was the biggest Kickstarter of all time. Whatever it was, there was another video saying, like, there's always another secret. And at the end of it, he dropped the link for the prologue, and I read it. And normally I don't do preview chapters because I know that, like, everything can be subject to change. There might be last minute edits. There might be that. I also don't want to get to a part where I'm really invested and then still have to wait another month.
Yeah.
But I did read that prologue, and me and my cousin were theorizing wildly based on that prologue, because it is one of the more revelatory prologues that we've gotten from these first 5 books.
And not just to Stormlight, but just, like, the Cosmar as a whole.
Yeah, my cousin and I, we were like, the Stormfather doesn't sound like the Stormfather in this.
Yeah, same.
What's going on with that? He also just told Gavilar that he's not going to approach any other members of the Kholin family, but we know he does. Is that even the Stormfather we're talking to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was in the same boat. There was also, because he appeared inside the building, which he tells Dalinar that he would never do something like that.
Right.
Maybe in Words of Radiance, I can't remember, but there were just a lot of details like that also threw me.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
No worries. I just agree entirely about it. It does, like, have we get a lot more insight into Gavilar's character, which I found super interesting because he was always this person that was always talked about. And we had gotten hints from Navani, that their relationship wasn't so well. But actually seeing it from his perspective was really interesting. And then, the Stormfather getting flipped on its head and like, oh, well, what's actually the truth? That was really cool. I also found that really interesting.
Yeah, in retrospect, I think that was actually really good kind of meta foreshadowing for the reveals that happened later in this book.
Yeah.
Of just like these people, these spren, these shards, they aren't necessarily what you think they are.
Right.
And like that was a big part of like the back half of this book was having those revelations. And I think using the prologue as a way of turning up the intrigue on that, I think was a really good decision.
Yeah.
I agree.
We also, correct me if I'm wrong, boys, but this is our first appearance of Kelsier in the Stormlight.
On screen, yeah, I think so.
Also, how we feeling about Thydakar as a name? I'm not a big fan. I'll just come out and say it. I don't like Thydakar.
Is it Thydakar or Thadakar? I always thought it was. I don't know how much it matters.
Thadakar might be a little better, but sorry, just I don't know.
I don't know about Thydakar either.
With
that sounds a
Stormlight,
little rough.
there are a couple world hoppers that I'm just like, why did you need to change your name? There's literally no reason except for Brandon wanting to like build suspense with the audience or theorizing, which is fun, but it also kind of takes me out of it. It's like, well, that's the reason, was just for fans to like theorize. There's not like a real world reason, which not all of the world hoppers, but
yeah, I mean, no reason other than that Kelsier is a very dramatic person.
He's very
theatric. He's absolutely the kind of guy who's like, I'm going to come up with a code name for myself to use off world. I mean, this is the guy who would answer questions about why he was being so mysterious with the answer like, we Mistborn are very mysterious people. We Mistborn need not make sense.
So, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Like I have thought about that. Like, why? What's the point? What's the purpose of doing that? And also, why'd you pick that name specifically?
Yeah.
But then it's just like, okay, this is just Kelsier being the theater kid that he was always meant to be.
Oh yeah,
the
it's
life he could have
extremely
had.
theatrical.
Right.
Right. It's like he's the big leader. He's mysterious. It's a new name.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's all I really had for the prologue. Are we ready to move to the actual novel?
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Well, great. So what did we think? What did you love? What did you hate? Tell me everything. Speak it into my soul.
Where to begin?
Kaladin and Szeth were my favorite.
Thank you.
I loved all of that. Every time it was a Kaladin and Szeth chapter, I jumped and did a backflip out of joy. Like, it was
nice.
Their whole journey was just incredible, and I loved their ending as well.
Yeah.
And at first, I think when I put the book down, I felt a little bit disappointed that we didn't get a whole lot of Kaladin doing cool Kaladin things.
Right.
But when you think about it, like, his journey really hit its peak in Rhythm of War. Like, his biggest issue in this series has always been an inability to let others get hurt or to honor the sacrifices of others, that he has to be the one to sacrifice himself. People can't sacrifice themselves for him, and having that sort of mental block with being okay with the fact that he can't protect everyone. And so having his story kind of wrap itself up around the fourth ideal of, I will accept that there are those I cannot protect. It just makes sense for his character that, like, the fifth ideal wouldn't be the biggest part for the hardest part for him, but that it would be his relationship with everybody else. And if you look at it in terms of, like, a lot of book 4 was about Odium trying to turn Kaladin into his champion.
Yeah.
And the fact that Odium failed at doing that, it's like, Kaladin, go go off into the woods and do some therapy. Like,
Yeah, practice the flute.
good. Like, honestly, what a great reward for Kaladin that he didn't have to be there for whatever was happening on Roshar elsewhere.
Yeah, which something talking about the therapy that kind of threw me off is Kaladin. When I first read it, Kaladin seems very on the nose, and it threw me out just a little bit. But I had two people bring up separate points that kind of helped me with that. One is that this world doesn't have therapy. In our world, you have to train for years to be good at it. Of course, he wouldn't be perfect. The other point is Kaladin was always kind of on the nose. Like in Words or Way of King, doesn't the bridge crew like call him out for being a little too on the nose or a little too forward or yeah. So
Yeah.
I think it fits with his character.
Yeah, well, and you got to remember that these of the two of these people doing therapy off in the woods, one was brought up in a feudalistic system where you are essentially property to somebody who has a different eye color from you. And I know Kaladin was in a higher non, but like dark eyes were like serfs, you know, and it's and you don't. The idea of individual autonomy is really foreign to a lot of cultures on Roshar, and being able to actually say like, no, I matter. And what was it that he had Szeth repeating to himself about, like, I get to choose, it's my decision, I'm worth making this decision over. Like that's something that is entirely revolutionary to that kind of culture. Then you go to Szeth. In his culture, if you disagree with the leaders, they give you a rock that you have to obey. And like, so I wasn't as put off by the heavy-handed therapy speak as I've seen a lot of people who have reviewed it like have said, because it's not supposed to be therapy for the reader. It's supposed to be therapy for these two extremely broken men who have no frame of reference on what mental health even is.
Right.
I agree entirely. I didn't like have an expectation or like this therapy has to go this way, or you know, there wasn't like any. I was never taken out of it. At least it all felt very natural because it seemed like it was Kaladin's first time doing it. Like I loved the progression of at the first he's just not able to break through the wall that Szeth has built up, but then we see over the story Kaladin learns more and they start to connect. And that was just really cool to see and really interesting.
Yeah.
That chapter where he's going through the chasm kata, that kata that he had first done in the chasms with Bridge 4.
Oh, and he's with Syl.
Syl was the spear, but then she would
amazing.
turn into her humanoid form and they'd be actually dancing through those same moves. Was just poetry on the page.
Yeah. One of the
love
best
that
chapters
scene.
in the entire book, not just the Kaladin and Szeth specific chapters.
Yeah. Well, and Szeth's story, I think was pretty, well handled. His backstory didn't get the same amount of attention that I think a lot of the other backstories in this series have gotten, just because this is the finale book of this arc.
Right.
But there were a lot of things that surprised me in a good way about it. The fact that he wasn't just a dissenting opinion, but had actually like organized an armed resistance.
Yeah, I was really
Against-
surprised by that.
Me as well.
Yeah. The fact that the chapter that really got me was Kaladin realizing like, no, he's not the same archetype as me. He's Tien in his backstory.
That was insane.
Yeah, he's not a warrior who was broken. He was this sweet summer child who never got the life that he deserved.
He just wanted to dance.
Yeah, he just wanted to dance.
One of my favorite things about Szeth's journey is somebody, I have no idea who, but somebody online pointed out that essentially he was just doing one Pokemon gym battle after another.
I did see that, and I did. It's something that I think Sanderson in general has struggled with in his last couple books. Is just, I get that there needs to be like a list of things you have to accomplish, but when each list of things you're accomplishing is essentially the same task over and over again,
Yeah.
Start to wonder, like, is there going to be a change up here? It happened with the nodes in Urithiru that Kaladin had to protect or destroy in Rhythm of War.
Right.
Where I was just kind of like, okay, is this going to be another just you either break it or protect it, and it's just the same sort of thing that we've read before?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that having part of it be kind of benchmarked by Szeth's progress in his mental health while doing it was a big plus compared to the nodes in Urithiru, where Kaladin was just getting sadder and sadder as he was doing it.
Right.
With this one, you get to actually see, like, there's progress made. You're not just forestalling calamity. You're actually building something as you're accomplishing these.
Yeah. And I think each of the temples felt really unique. So it was technically the same task over and over again, but they had their own flavor.
I will say I did like the chapter where they subverted the expectation a little bit, where it was the 2 honor bearers that attacked him before he had gotten to it. That whole fight scene with Nightblood was really well done because it took him out of he has his Windrunner powers or whatever powers he was using with the Honor Blade that he had, or Dustbringer powers.
Yeah.
And so that was really interesting to see. I did enjoy that one. It kind of broke the monotonous of, we're just going to go kill the next honor bearer.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the sequence of Szeth finally being allowed to use his division.
Oh, yeah, that was cool.
With a Spren that we now know quite a bit better than we did before.
I know.
I think we just go ahead. I mean, the fact that it's Ox from the Sunlit Man.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, apparently the numbers that he had given as his name, like he gave a string of numbers as what his designation was, and apparently if you line that up with the English alphabet, it spells AUX.
Oh, yes. So, like, Sandy, you son of a gun.
That was already, like, that was there from the beginning of this book.
Yeah.
Having it be like you have to earn this surge, kind of as a different thing from the other orders that we've seen. And it makes sense because Division is, I think, the surge that destroyed Ashen originally. And so it makes sense that the Spren would be like, no, you have to prove that you can be responsible with this before you are allowed to use it. And then when he hits that threshold and I think the sentence is, the very air around him ignited.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
There was a point where I was wondering, are they just going to have like a bundle of honor blades tied to their backs? Like when they collected the first one, I was like, are they actually just going to have like 10 honor blades? And then they did.
I just also wanted to note how we're talking about kind of how Szeth had his journey with the different monasteries, I think they were called. Kaladin continuing to practice with the flute at the end of every day, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
And his growth was, I think, represented a little bit in that. And when the wind started to play back to him and things such as that, I thought that was also a cool symbolic gesture of Kaladin's growth as well.
Yeah.
Which, good bringing up the wind, we haven't brought them up yet. Old gods? How we feeling?
Gods that predate the shattering? What?
Right?
Crazy.
And it's one of those things that, like, I typically don't like when new lore is introduced in the last book of something. Unless you do it like in Hero of Ages, where the whole book is about figuring out this lore.
Right.
But the the whole plot of Hero of Ages is we need to figure out what's going on behind the scenes here. Normally I don't like that, but then I went back to the scene in Way of Kings where Hoyd plays the flute and tells Kaladin the story about the Wandersail. And he gives Kaladin the flute, and he says, when you hear the notes played back to you, you'll know that you've got it. And it's like it was there even in book 1.
Yeah, the foreshadowing's crazy.
The foreshadowing is insane.
I was just going to say, I wonder since, how this book ends and where it leaves us in terms of big players on the chessboard on Roshar. Like, Wind, Stone, and Night, I think, were the 3 old gods mentioned.
I think so.
Like, are they going to be kind of what Honor and Cultivation were to this first half? In terms of, like, they're going to be kind of the ones leading the sentient peoples of Roshar in this fight against Retribution, or if it's still going to kind of be like their backstage. There's a whole lot of things that were kind of dropped on us in the middle of everything that we didn't really have time to really go into in the book.
Right.
But that I think, in some ways it's really good that, because it means like, there is a way forward, and we not everything is super hopeless, and we can kind of start theorizing about what's going on in the back half of the series. But, personally, like I said, I prefer when the last book, you don't have to worry about that sort of stuff.
Right.
So, yeah.
The Old Gods, I think it was really interesting of Brandon Sanderson to like make kind of there's a connection there between the Bondsmith Spren, obviously with Wind, and then the Stormfather. We have the Night Sister and Night, and then I know it's not quite as close, but the sibling being locked to a building or being locked to Urithiru definitely kind of connects with Stone as well. So I really enjoyed that connection that he made, and I'm curious if there's a reason that Cultivation and Honor made them like the Old Gods.
Yeah, it is kind of an interesting thing, and I mean, there's implications in this book towards the end that maybe those aren't the only 3 shards that have a history on Roshar.
Right.
So there could be some of that coming along, Yeah, like there's just so much that we can theorize that we don't yet have like the anything concrete.
We need 5 more books.
Yeah, release them now.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what dropped the rating down for me as a Stormlight book. It's like, as a Cosmere book, this is everything I've ever wanted. With this is your Avengers Infinity War.
Right.
It's everything comes in, and everything like has a part to play in the greater story of the Cosmere. But then as like a Stormlight book, I'm like, you gave us so much and so little to go off of with it. That like, was this necessarily the right book to do that? I don't know, because I haven't read the next ones.
Right. Yeah, I think once we have read, 6 through 10, we'll probably definitely look at this book very differently.
Yeah, I've been telling my coworker, who has only read Mistborn, he hasn't done Stormlight. I was telling him, like, I think this book is going to have a similar meta story to it as Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
Where it came out and people kind of bounced off of it. They were like, how could you possibly end your story that way?
Right.
You dropped these huge bombs on us right at the end, and we don't have any resolution. And then, Return of the Jedi came out, and now it's like, no, Empire was actually a defining moment for Star Wars as a franchise. Like, that was the movie everybody points to as being the thing that made Star Wars what it is. And I'm trusting that's what this book is going to end up being once we actually have the full story.
Yeah, I agree. Joey, you brought up Nightblood earlier, and I loved that Nightblood got some character development in this story where he was actually able to stop himself from killing his friends.
I know, I agree entirely. That was such a cool, because we'd gotten little hints here and there of like Nightblood responding to certain things that Szeth was saying in his head, and talking about like the nature of his existence and like what things are truly evil. And that was such a cool thing at the end for that character growth to have mattered.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to see what he does with Nightblood in the future, because it's the inanimate object that's come to life and can think.
Right.
And it's such a cool concept.
That he's maybe learning the surges, or can maybe grant surges.
Yeah. Like, just, there's so much potential there. I'm just so excited for it.
Brandon, I need more.
Seriously.
Write the books.
Well, we're supposedly, in this interim, we may be getting the sequel to Warbreaker.
Yeah, which would be phenomenal.
Yeah. So we might get a little more Nightblood going on.
I really hope so.
Yeah, and I could see him doing something like just picking up where the characters are now on Roshar. That could be interesting, but I really do hope we get some of the in-between after Warbreaker and before they came to Roshar.
Right, because, like, Vivina is nothing like she is in Warbreaker when she shows up in Oathbringer. She's it's still the same character. You could see like how you might get from point A to point B, but you can tell a lot has happened to this character.
Right. Well, kind of as we just end our Szeth and Kaladin story, really we've got two big moments for them left. Let's start with Szeth swearing the fifth ideal and then breaking his bond.
I don't even know how I feel about it. It was good. I enjoyed it. It was good.
I think it was a really great character moment. However, I'm not going to lie, I am kind of disappointed that we didn't get to learn more about that fifth ideal and what powers it grants.
Mm-hmm. It was just very, not necessarily out of nowhere, but just, I didn't expect it at all. So I was a bit stunned and shocked of like, oh, okay. I don't necessarily understand why he's doing this, but I think once I reread the book, with having the full context of the story, I might understand a bit more. But on the first read, I was just like, oh, okay. It still worked out well. It was just surprising.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to have to reread the book because when you said that, I have no memory of that happening. I'm going to be perfectly honest. So much happened in this book.
Ideal.
Of Szeth swore the fifth ideal in this book?
Yeah, literally he swears it and then he breaks his bond.
Okay,
yeah, that's like the thing.
So much was thrown at us on the 10th day of this book.
Yeah,
I know.
There are things that I've seen people bring up on social media. I'm like, oh yeah, that character was in this book.
That's my only complaint with the pacing.
Full disclosure, I read this whole book over the span of the first week of it being open. So, and the summary is not yet available on the Coppermind website. So, gotcha. I'll be perfectly honest. There's a lot of things that I just don't remember because of the sheer scale of everything else that was going on.
Yeah, that's fair. It was an insane novel. There was some really good foreshadowing, I think, about him going to break this bond. I wish it had been just a little better. Like there were moments, but it didn't feel like a consistent build up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it caught me off guard, so.
Yeah.
And then we have Harold Kaladin. How we feeling, boys?
I love it. I love Harold Kaladin.
I think it's pretty great.
Same.
We finally know what that death rattle means from book 1 that says he must pick it up, the fallen title, the tower, the crown, and the spear.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's probably what this is referring to.
Yeah.
I'm so happy he's immortal, man.
Insane foreshadowing.
I'm so
no
happy
one's killing my boy.
Yeah, I was so worried that this, because like I said earlier, book 4 was really Kaladin's peak in terms of Kaladin doing cool Kaladin things, and so I was really worried that it was going to be, the story of Fleet running his whole race and then dying anyways. Which still technically did happen, and I think we can confirm that the story of Fleet was in fact a foreshadowing for Kaladin's own story.
Yeah.
But it's not death in the sense where it's a loss, so to speak.
Right. I told one of you, I can't remember which one, but at the end of every single book, Kaladin has this like really cool, amazing moment. Most of them are fights. I think maybe all of them are fights. And it's awesome. And this book is a really weird contrast where I think that this is probably the most heroic thing and the biggest impact on the world as a whole that he has ever done. But it just doesn't feel like those other moments because it's not a fight. It's not a swearing of an ideal. He just says, I'm here and I'm going to do what's right. And he makes an impact and I love it.
Yeah,
I agree entirely. The fact that the moment isn't like on these huge proportions or, it's not some epic fight scene just makes it more impactful for me. For lack of a better word, subtlety of it or like how it's not on, it wasn't this huge thing I think that really highlighted the moment.
Yeah. Well, and it did coincide with one of his ideals, his fifth ideal, because he did swear the fifth ideal at the end of this book.
Oh, sorry. Now it's my turn. Did he?
Yeah, it was. I will protect myself,
right,
or something along those lines. Where it was like, I will accept that sometimes the person who needs to be protected is myself, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I forgot about that.
And having him then make a choice that Kaladin in book 1 would have never made. You know,
right.
I'm going to go off and live in this paradise cognitive realm type of thing while everyone else on this planet suffers. Book 1 Kaladin would never make that choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But having him brought to the point where swearing that fifth ideal and realizing sometimes I'm the one who needs to be protected, and having him decide to do that while also something about what they did with the Oath Pact just then changed its nature so that they're actually sheltering the Spren from retribution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which means, you know, we like it secures the legacy of the Knights Radiant going forward. And it's that, like, the Kaladin's realization, sometimes fighting this fight isn't the right thing to do. And sometimes we need to just hunker down and weather this storm.
Yeah.
Like, coincides with that fifth ideal really well, I think. And I also liked how it wasn't this big grandiose explosion of power, you know, going to be really, really hard to top books 2 and 4. With his ideals,
right,
getting his blade and his armor, you know, like all of those, going to be really hard to top that. So I'm actually really glad that it was a tone shift for this one, where it was just kind of like a simple, this is what needs to be done. So I guess I'm here, so I'm going to be the one who does it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, so I think last question before we move on to some more characters is, with the ending of Szeth's story, do we think he's going to play a larger role in the next 5 books or no?
I don't think so. I think he definitely could, but the fact that it was his wife scribing all of the end events, and it kind of paints this picture of him living happily with a family, and he's missing his arm and leg, right?
Yeah.
I think.
For sure, his arm, I can't remember on the leg, but maybe.
He was pretty mangled, regardless of what specifically it was.
I feel like that's his story coming to an end, because he never wanted any part of this. It's his ending where he's able to just live happily and live a fulfilled life that he's choosing to live, especially with his the physical impairments that I'm not sure. Oh, because there's no more Knights Radiance, right? Because all the bonds were separated whenever Retribution and that cataclysmic event happened. So there's not regrowth anymore. I can't remember very well.
I don't know if I think the Radiant bonds are still there, but there's no more Stormlight.
Right.
Because I think the whole point of the Heralds reforging the Oath Pact was, we are preserving these Spren so that the Knights Radiant aren't gone, but like they're essentially useless right now because they don't have any investiture that they have access to.
Mm-hmm. So there's no regrowth.
So there's tower. They do still have access to the tower light.
Oh.
You know, by the time Szeth got there, even if he did, we have to remember that to regrow a limb, you have to like still see a limb as a part of yourself. So if Szeth had accepted that, it may have just been too late.
Yeah. And it does seem like he has accepted it. Every indication at the end of Szeth's story is that he's finally found contentment, and that he gets to retire. And the story doesn't have to be about him anymore, which is kind of the perfect thing for Szeth, because his whole thing is, I hate that this is me that has to do this.
I agree entirely.
Right. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think we will see him. I don't think he's going to play a major role. The only thing is dependent on how Brandon handles Nightblood. But I think we're going to see Nightblood with a new wielder in books 6 through 10.
Yeah. I think if anything, if Szeth comes back, it's going to be kind of in a similar... He's going to kind of slot into a similar thing, maybe that like as Vasher has or Zahel has.
Yeah.
Where he's there. He's not like completely absent from the story, but he's not the one actively dealing with these things.
Yeah.
You know, like I could see him like having a mentorship role or something like that. But I don't think Szeth's happy ending is him going back to the front lines.
I agree. Yeah. I'm going to be a little disappointed if that is where he ends up in books 6 through 10.
Right.
Yeah. Well, how about we move to Adolin? That sound good with everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of your identity and how it might not allow you to heal from lost limbs.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I loved that moment. Yes, of course, it was sad to see him lose his leg, but it just felt like such a great character moment because he'd been known, like, all 5 books as being the best duelist in the world. And now where does that leave him? What is Adolin if he's not a duelist?
Yeah. He was my favorite character in this book.
I think so. Me too.
Like, Adolin and his whole viewpoints were the peak of this book for me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I enjoyed it. I just really liked that moment where that chapter where he's in the line of like shieldmen and pikemen, and he's just standing there fighting and struggling and realizing this is what they have to go through.
Yeah.
That was super interesting. I love that a lot.
He doesn't have his shards. He doesn't have any Knights Radiant backing him up. He's essentially just a last line of defense spearman. It's not a one-on-one duel like he's good at. It's just, it was very, his whole story was very Helm's Deep.
Yeah.
Like that was the general vibe. And I think that it was pulled off, in the same sort of success as Helm's Deep was.
Yeah.
And having having watched the writing lectures that Brandon Sanderson does, I can say with I'm almost entirely certain that Brandon started out that whole, like, Adolin's whole thing doing, I'm going to do Helm's Deep. I'm going to do my own version of Helm's Deep, because he always brings up Helm's Deep in his classes about how to pull off certain types of twists where Gandalf says, look to my coming on the first light of the 3rd day. And then things get so bad you forget that that's still, like, Gandalf's on his way. And so then when he shows up, it's like, oh, right, we only needed to hold out this long. And then the exact same thing happens with Maya and the Unbound.
Yeah.
And we knew that whole time Maya is off recruiting other Spren but things got so bad that you forget that that they had that contingency. And so when she shows up, it's like, right, Maya's coming back and Notam's here. And
Sanderson sets up this false expectation because Adolin believes that she's going to recruit more Knights Radiance. And then they have that conversation at the end where Maya's like, no, that's not what I'm doing. I don't remember specifically what she was doing. I know that she brought back volunteers, but I just remember it being a big point of that she wasn't doing what Adolin thought she was doing.
Yeah. He thought that
was
she
kind
was
of a
going
twist
to
as
get
well.
more, I guess, alive Spren so that they could make more Knights Radiance.
Oh, yeah, she brought all the Dead Eyes. Right.
And she brought the Dead Eyes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will admit his line where he's like, rise up on oath, pulled me out just a little bit. It felt a little cringy to me. But
I don't
also
like
loved
unoathed.
it. Yeah.
It's like you just have to appreciate it for what it is, but man.
Yeah, I don't. I like the concept because it's something that has very heavy implications for, like, what's going on Roshar. But the word unoathed, I just don't.
Yeah.
Just call them Unbound. Like, how much cooler of a name is Unbound?
Yeah, I do like that. So I've got a question for you guys, and this is purely hypothetical. I was talking to one of my buddies who he just started Oathbringer, so he really does not know a lot. He hasn't read anything else in the Cosmere. He was asking me about shard blades, and specifically, like, if they grant powers, dead-eyed shard blades, not bonded shard blades. Now that we have the unoathed, do we think that there might be some sort of radiant bond powers that we see in the future?
I think it's more, at least in my own understanding, it's like how Notam was able to be there by himself. I don't remember the specific reasoning, but he didn't have a bond with a human. I felt like the Deadeyes were able to manifest in their physical forms, but not have that, I think it's called a Nahel bond, or however it's pronounced. But there wasn't that bond there, so they couldn't access the surges. They could only access the physical manifestations of the Spren themselves in the forms of shard blades and shard plate. So I don't think they'd be able to give them powers or access to the surges, at least from my understanding.
Curious about is, like, Maya is healing. I don't think she'd quite gotten her sight back, but something happened after Ba Ado Mishram was released, and she made a lot of progress. So I'm in the same place. I don't necessarily think we'll see surge binding, but I feel like there's more happening there.
I agree.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there is some weird investiture stuff going on between the Unoathed and the Spren involved in that. I'd be curious to see what happens now that Ba Edo Mishram is released, and like, because we know that her imprisonment was what caused the Deadeyes.
Right.
And so very clearly, like, something has been kind of bottled in and held back investiture-wise since she was imprisoned. And, like, I'd be curious to see. I think it would be great, like, if there wasn't any Radiant sort of powers granted, because I like the idea of this is, like, a true partnership. We don't have oaths between us. We don't have these magical concepts to fall back on. It's just we're working together. Like, I really like that idea.
I do too.
Yeah.
And I think that if they were eventually to, like, if it was turned into a bond that granted powers, I feel like that would kind of be a disservice to the Deadeyes that make up the Unoathed.
Yeah.
Because, like, it makes sense that they wouldn't want to do that because of how badly they were hurt before.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just something I was thinking about these last few days. Again, I'm with you, Szeth. I think this was probably my favorite part of this book, and I loved the contrast between the battle sequences and Adolin's breaks as he spent time with, it's not a king, is it Emperor? What is his official title?
Yes.
Yeah, the Prime.
Emperor.
The Prime. Yeah, thank you. I loved those Prime scenes.
Yeah.
As they're learning whatever their game is called, they're talking philosophy, they're talking battle tactics. Just so good, and a really nice, I think, breather from the battle scenes.
Yeah, I agree. I think having those scenes of respite, to break up some of that tension, because the rest of the book is just fraught with tension.
Right.
And like, just sitting down and we're going to do character development this chapter. You know, it also gave us the only bit of foreshadowing as to how this book ends with the Sunmaker's Gambit that Adolin taught Yanagon. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that. I do wish we had seen Talon go Super Saiyan on all of the Fused.
I know.
But at the same time, I also really like that they just walk in and it's just the definition of the word desolation.
Yeah. Brandon's definitely, I mean, he said that the Heralds are going to play a larger role in the second half, and I'm excited for that. And I think he was doing a lot to foreshadow that, like with this scene here, and also with Nail and his fight against Kaladin, where we're not, at least I wasn't entirely sure what was happening, but I mean, he won, so.
Oh, yeah. The whole, like, Herald powers that are using investiture in some sort of way that isn't necessarily surges, like him moving faster and things like that.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that concept to be explored, because I don't know if that's the result of any bond or just because they've lived so long. So and especially with, oh man, that Talon scene was so cool when it was like in an eye blink, he flashed forward and it was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see him in the second half of the series.
And that line where she's like, you could have had the city. You could have won, but you let your pride take over or whatever. It was so good.
I am Talon Adolin, Herald of War.
Crazy.
Yeah, I think there's something investiture going on with the Heralds in terms of like their speed and maybe their strength. Because, like, I don't think you could ever train to get as fast as them. But I do know that Brandon has said in terms of their skill in combat, that's actually just the result of them having fought through the desolations. That, like, if you're in combat constantly, and when you're not in combat, you're on the run so that you don't get tortured.
Right.
Like, for 4,500 years, you're just going to naturally be better at that than almost anybody who's only had one lifetime to hone those skills. And so, like, I agree. I think there's like some sort of investiture thing going on with their strength and their speed. But in terms of the skill, that's all just them.
Yeah.
And I really like that. That, like, in terms of technique, like, nope, they're just really good at it because they've been doing it for millennia.
Yeah, I won't stick on it too long because we moved on from Kaladin, but that whole scene where Nail almost kills him was just, that was the first time I feel like, I'm sure there's other been parts, but where Kaladin felt truly powerless for me, and at least in a battle where he had a spear and he had access to weapons. That was pretty crazy. Just seeing him get bested so completely by Nail was super interesting to read. I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, is he about to die? Like, what's going to happen?
Is this how it happens? Yeah.
This is book 5. Anything's on the table.
Yeah, I know. He could die here. Like, I don't know.
Back to Adolin, one of my favorite scenes was day 1, day 2 maybe, where he's telling the Prime, like, hey, like, he just completely undermines the general, and he's like, yeah, if you do this, you're gonna lose the city. But then he has that moment where he's like, I shouldn't have done that, and he goes and he apologizes. And one of my favorite Adolin moments.
Yeah,
I agree. That growth and how those characters came to interact with each other was interesting to watch, and I did enjoy that character growth with Adolin. I also really enjoyed Adolin's self-introspection at how he felt towards his father.
Yeah.
Like growing up in the shadows, or not in the shadow of his father, and like wanting to, still feeling that anger at his father for, you know, the whole thing that happened with Evie. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. But I loved that so much. And it hurt so bad whenever he was like, whenever I see my father again, I just want to, I don't remember if it was like say I'm sorry or say I love you or something like that, but just like I want to fix things because now I understand that he's a broken man. And then just Dalinar dies. It's like he's never going to get the chance.
Yeah,
like,
if Adolin ever sees him again, it's going to be as the cognitive shadow Blackthorn. That's Odium, that Retribution. It's not Odium anymore.
I know, it's Retribution.
that Retribution has kind of socked away for later.
Yeah, and that's Cosmar and we've talked a little bit about this. I have mixed feelings about the Blackthorn because I think it's cool that Retribution kind of got his champion anyway. I'm a little worried that Brandon's going to bring the Blackthorn back as Dalinar because he has all of his memories, and it's just we're just going to get Dalinar back after a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily upset about it. I definitely don't like it. It felt like it cheapened Dalinar's sacrifice to me. Like his whole resisting it in the 4th book and then not becoming his champion in the 5th book as well by breaking the ideals just for Retribution to get what he wanted anyways. I understand it works in the context of the story. It just in the moment I was like, dang, Dalinar did all that, but he still died, and then Retribution got what he wanted anyways.
Yeah, I think I know that in the in interviews, Brandon has talked about how he wrote 3 different endings for this book and then gave them to his beta readers, and then wrote a 4th ending based on their feedback. And I think if I had to put money on it, I think Dalinar's fate is the parts that got changed.
Yeah, I agree.
Because obviously the Blackthorn is going to be a big part of the Cosmere going forward, right? I think that there was one ending where Dalinar willingly became Odium's champion in order to avoid fighting, and you know that. And it was kind of like I'll have his ear. I'll be able to talk to him. I'll be able to share these experiences and try to influence Odium. But right now, in order to honor my oaths, I have to, become his servant. And then there's like one where Dalinar just dies, and there's one where like Dalinar does something else and still lives. And that the ending we got was kind of a case of trying to have your cake and eat it too, Dalinar made this heroic sacrifice and he didn't fall to Odium and he didn't do the but we still gonna have Dalinar in later books.
It's like okay.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, if I had to guess that's probably where I'd say the big changes to the ending were made.
Yeah. I'm totally okay with this Spren Blackthorn probably going to be an unmade version of Dalinar. I think that's really cool. My worry really is just that is going to be redeemed, and then actual Dalinar's sacrifice won't mean as much.
Yeah.
That will be pretty frustrating if that happens.
Yeah. I mean, we do know there is a precedent for cognitive shadows just getting stapled onto bodies. via hemalurgy. I mean, that's how. I mean, as far as we know, that's how Thydakar exists.
Right? Who knows?
So,
He just
like,
kind of into Dalinar's dead body. It's
yeah, absolutely nothing prohibiting Dalinar from just straight up coming back. And we know that Kelsier still has the scars on his arms, so it probably will still even look like Dalinar.
it's like great. That's
so
awesome.
maybe Adolin will get his chance to apologize
goodbye,
to his father. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree that, like, if you're gonna have Dalinar die in this book, have him die in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know,
right.
And like, if you want to still have the Blackthorn, that's fine, but don't give the image of what the Blackthorn used to be all of current Dalinar's memories.
His memories, right?
You know, I think it would be way more terrifying if it actually was the Dalinar who burned the rift. Like, you know, pluck him straight out of that night where he was at, where the thrill was like working most strongly in him, and have that be your Blackthorn. You don't need to give him current Dalinar's memories and just turn him into the exact same guy.
Yeah, if it was just he plucked him out of the rift and it's just the height of the Blackthorn, then I'd be like, okay, that's cool. It's just the fact he has the current memories is, oh man, do not do it, Sanderson, please.
We'll see how it goes.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Well, so we're hitting just about an hour now. So I think we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, I believe. I think we're going to have to end up cutting this episode into 2 parts. So we will return maybe next week, maybe in 2 weeks, depending on our schedules, with some more Wind and Truth Spoilercast. But before we end this episode, does anyone have any last thoughts on Adolin's story in this novel?
I do. There's another death rattle that came true with Adolin's story. Ooh. It was 10 people with shard blades alight standing before a wall of black and white and red. Oh. With the shard blades alight, I think it's talk about the unoathed in Azir there.
That's cool. So
that's
really cool.
Yet another death rattle that we finally get to know what that's referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah. I think my last thing is I'm heartbroken that him and Shallan were separated at the end of this. And I know that they're going to find each other either in book 6 or before book 6 even starts, but I'm just sad for them. They love each other so much and they don't deserve this.
My final thoughts is not actually on Adolin, but I hope Sanderson comes out with, it's called The Towers, that him and Yanagon played.
Oh,
that was like the game.
A playable
It'd be super
version
cool
of it.
if Sanderson came out with something like that.
Stormlight chess sort of thing.
Exactly. I'll pull the
Hell yeah.
Sunmaker's Gambit.
That would be awesome. Well, Szeth, before we end this episode, you want to tell people where they can find you?
I'm Setherton on YouTube, and that's pretty much the only platform that I'm currently using. But every week, me and another friend by the name of Karanimo, we're playing through the entirety of the Halo franchise in order. In chronological order. So we're about to finish, at the time of this recording, we're about to finish Combat Evolved, and we're going to go on to Halo 2, which is probably what we'll be doing when this episode comes out, so go check it out.
Hell yeah. On those, are you doing just the mainline games, or are you doing some of the side ones as well?
We're doing ODST. We played Reach first, because it happens first in the timeline.
Hell yeah.
But then it's just going to be the main line, other than those two.
Nice. Well, great. Audience, I will leave a link in the description for Szeth's channel if you want to check it out.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for listening to the Nerds Only podcast. We will see you in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Drink some water.
See ya.